All right, hello and welcome everybody. My name is Teresa Stack. I'm one of the career counselors here with Roosevelt University, and I am happy to introduce our guest speaker today, Margi Patel, who is also a graduate of Roosevelt. I believe you got your bachelor's and master's from Roosevelt, right, Margi?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, so Roosevelt alum, yay.
Yes.
And somebody who has lots of experience in HR and compensation. We'll be talking to you today about evaluating a job offer. I mentioned a couple minutes ago, we have the webinar function set up for this particular workshop. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, just feel free to type them in the chat and Margi will be happy to answer those. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Margi.
Great. Thanks, Teresa. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here. As Teresa mentioned, I am a former alum of Roosevelt. And so it's great when I'm able to connect back with the university and the students. This is probably my second time hosting kind of like being part of a conversation webinar with Roosevelt. Just a little brief background about me. I've been in the HR space for many, many years. I've really kind of traveled in different places within HR. I started with benefits, went into recruiting, did a little bit of HR generalist, and then eventually landed in the compensation function. And I've been in that space for about 10 years. I've been fortunate enough to also, along with that travel of career, have different industry experience too. But in my most recent role, I am a compensation director with RSM US. We are in the professional services industry, really focusing on audit, tax, and consulting services. So again, kind of excited to be here, and hopefully you guys all have lots of questions for me. And as Teresa said, go ahead and just pop them down in the chat box, and we'll try to answer them for you. And I would like this to be interactive, right? One of the things that I love is having the opportunity to really get feedback from you guys or have questions. So then it's not just me generally talking, right? So in today's discussion, we are going to focus on evaluating a job offer. And what does that really mean? Because of the fact that there is multiple stages associated with it. So with that being said, right, I'll kind of go right into it. So when do we get to that stage of when it's time for us to evaluate a job offer? It could be when you're actually at a point where you've got the offer and then you have to make that decision, or it could be at a point where you're starting to think through in advance of being faced with that decision. So let's say you might just be starting your job search and interview process, and you might get a inkling or some sort of like, okay, I think I'm going to get an offer soon and I want to be prepared, right? So you kind of become a little bit more proactive in that space and try to think about what are some of those things when I think about how do I evaluate this offer? What do I need to do? Do I just take it? Do I think about other things? And so we're really going to kind of work through some of those questions that might come up in your mind. It's come up in my mind as I've gone through the process of evaluating different job offers on, is it right for me? Do I need some clarifications? So we'll kind of walk through some of those things. One of the journals that I read is the Harvard Business Review, and they have this article by Jeff Weiss called Guide to Negotiating. And so one of the first steps that they document in terms of evaluating is the shift in your mindset, right? So as you think about getting to that stage of evaluating an offer, it's the shift in your mindset. And this really means is recognizing the fact that when you get the offer, it's a different phase of that process. So, you've kind of transitioned from interviewing to now to this offer stage of that full job search process. And what it does, it makes you think a little bit more methodical, right? It makes you start thinking about what are those matters from a professional life and a personal life that matter to you, right? And kind of use those things as your metrics. And then what you do is think about assessing that offer against those metrics that you have, which is your professional and your private. And really asking yourself, as while you assess those metrics, is what's important to me? What is of value to me, right? It's kind of one of those things. I know what's important to me right now when I have the offer and I have to make that decision. But for those that may not have the offer yet, maybe pre-thinking on what that is. Maybe it means you write down, do a list of, start thinking about, from a professional and personal or private life, making a list of like, these are the things that are important to me as I think about professionally, as I think about personally, and how those things integrate with each other. So along with that, some of the elements as we think about a job offer, right, and evaluating that is, first and foremost, it's the position. That's one of the most important things we're going to look at. So you've applied for a position, you're at a stage where you get the offer. You're going to think, is this the role that I want? You applied for the role, you interviewed for it, but have things changed between when you started the process to where you're at right now? And really sit down and think about, okay, is this really the position that's going to be expected of what I want? When you actually get that role? Has anything changed with the organization between when you interviewed for the role versus now, right? Has the position changed? Has the management structure changed, right? So you may have started interviewing with one manager that the position may have reported to, and all of a sudden that no longer is the case. The person may have left and now it's somebody else. So it's asking and thinking through those questions and writing them down, right? A lot of times there's so many thoughts that come to our mind that we forget to either compartmentalize or write them down. And then all of a sudden it's this influx of questions and you're trying to pick and choose which is more important. So as things come to you, write them down, because I think if anything, it's going to give you a little bit more clarity and detail around what you need to go back to the organization and ask in case there's areas where you're just unclear and you need a little bit more transparency of what you're actually walking into based on your decision. The other thing you have to think about is, are you flexible in terms of the position that you are taking will be acceptable as far as your landing point, right? So if you've got multiple offers, for example, for different positions and you're evaluating them against each other, then what is the role that is really going to be of your interest to you and jumpstart your career, right? And it may be in the same functional space, but it might be in different areas of the business and the different tasks associated with it. Because as we all know, sometimes, you apply for a position, you interview for it, but you really don't know what the position entails until you really get into the organization and start doing the role. Because there's only so much through conversations and descriptions that you get. So that's going to be important, understanding that you may have applied for a position, but know that there's going to be a little bit of change that might be happening or involved once you actually start with the organization. The other piece in terms of the position is from a transportability perspective. So is it a position where it requires you to travel? Or is it a position that's kind of home-based with minimal travel or no travel? We all know this is not a typical year as we think about jobs, as we think about offers, as we think about how organizations are set up. In this pandemic, right? If a role comes across and it requires you to travel, you might see some of those things in, for example, manufacturing industry where, they've got plants and that might require employees to travel. Is that something that's okay with you? Again, is that something that's going to, again, interfere with what you might have in terms of like your personal goals when you think about your professional and your personal goals? So something to think about as you look at and assess the actual position that you're applying for. Another important element is the actual organization. And this is after the position, because the position's going to be your day-to-day, right? As you think about what you're going to do every single day, 40 plus hours a week. The next is the organization, is because the organization sets what it's all about, right? So as you think about the organization, do you have a clear understanding and transparency on their values and their culture? Right? How do you find that out? You may have asked that during the interview process. They may have shared it, but how do you actually know what their values are as an organization, what they stand for? So in that scenario, research online to get an understanding of the culture. What are some of the employees saying? There's lots of blogs and boards out there, such as Glassdoor, Reddit, Going Concern, where you can actually go online and understand employees that are new hires, that are experienced, that have been there a long time. What are they saying year over year about the organization and its culture, right? Do they value diversity and inclusivity? That's really important as we think about uh, future of the organization and future of the workspace. Is that something that's important to you? What are some of the key initiatives and the growth that the organization is working on? Is it one of those firms or organizations where it's status quo, or are they always reinventing themselves, being innovative? So you know that there's a growth aspect to it. Is it in the not-for-profit sector? Is it in the for-profit sector? And so looking at the baseline of that organization in terms of how they're structured, what does the CEO say? And what does the leadership team look like? And all of these things are easily accessible via the web, going onto the actual organization's website to really get a foundational understanding of the organization in itself. The other piece is if philanthropic or community service is important to you, what are the viewpoints and engagements of the organization in the community? Do they support charitable organizations that might be important to you? How far, to what extent, right? A lot of organizations are, what I've seen in this pandemic is really step up in terms of supporting charities, even more than what they may have historically. And so I see that kind of growing as time goes on. But if that's an element that's important to you, look into it, research, and really understand in terms of what is that space that they're in, and does it align to your personal values, right? Is it something that's a cause that you're an advocate for? And maybe that might also help you understand the organization a little bit more. The third is the compensation and benefits. And so some might think this might be the first, first determinant of how I evaluate a job offer is through the compensation and benefits and total rewards. But again, this is a component of the overall picture that you look at from a job offer evaluation perspective. So one of the pieces of compensation and benefits is the base salary, right? So as you think about your offer, and hopefully throughout the process, you've had the opportunity to look at what is my baseline pay that I'm willing to take. So like you always have this threshold, this sliding scale that in an ideal state, I'd like it here, but in reality, I'm okay with right here. So have that number in mind as you look at and evaluating the pay component. Because while pay isn't everything, think about some of the other areas that can build on the base salary. But it's important to make sure you've got, from a minimal perspective, what is that minimal pay that you're not willing to go below? And a lot of times that pay is going to be influenced by the type of organization and the type of position. So there is not this, whether you are a entry level individual in terms of stepping into the workforce versus you're an experienced, there isn't a standard scale where, no matter what, you're going to get into an organization and they're going to offer you X. It's really going to depend on your background, the type of degree, the type of role, what specialized skills you may have. That's all going to drive in terms of where your base salary will end up and what they will offer you in the organization. The other is, as part of that package, have they provided you with a bonus opportunity? Now, there's a multitude of things that goes into a bonus opportunity. So first and foremost, as part of your package, have they given you a sign-on bonus? And so if they haven't, then okay, maybe it's something you document and say, hey, maybe I can put that as my going back and saying, hey, is there a way I could get a sign-on bonus, right? It's absolutely okay to ask. Nothing, nothing wrong comes out of just asking. They might come back and say no, but as you evaluate your offer, if that's not part of your package, think about asking on, maybe I can get a little bit of a sign-on bonus. Incentive pay. Does the organization and the offer consist of a incentive pay, which is basically a annual bonus, or it could be a quarterly bonus or a semi-annual bonus. But is there some sort of a bonus plan uh, that exists within the company that's driven by your or the individual's performance? A lot of the bonus plans have two components, which is the employee itself and how they perform helps determine what they get, as well as how the company does. So it's important to ask, to say, hey, is there a bonus opportunity available annually or semi-annually within the organization? So that's an area that you may consider, because bonus then ends up becoming a part of your, what's the view called, total cash compensation, which is your base salary and your bonus opportunity. And what you will typically see is your base salary and bonus will continue to grow as your experience grows. So, so think about asking around the incentive plan and what the opportunities is. An additional kind of compensation related benefits that might have is profit sharing. Some of the smaller companies do offer profit sharing where they want to give back to their employees. So that might be a benefit. Again, that's money that's going into a savings account. Stock opportunities for public companies. Sometimes they have employee stock purchase plans. And these plans are helpful to employees because a lot of times they give you the opportunity to purchase employee stock at a reduced rate. Again, what it's doing is time over time, it's going to help build your kind of your total cash compensation, your portfolio, as you think about your pay and your benefits. When you think about benefits, what is important to you for benefits? It really is very individualistic. Most companies these days have a wide variety of benefits within their portfolio that they offer. So health insurance is one of the first things that comes to mind. And a lot of times, depending on where you are at a point in your career, you may need health insurance and you may not. So that might not be important to you. But that's a pretty big chunk in terms of what a company invests in their employee. Vacation and time off. Is that something that that you want outside of just the standard holidays that you see companies offer and are off on? Additional perks such as gym memberships. One of the biggest things is that in the recent times is mental health benefits. Companies are going above and beyond to offer that to their employees to help towards dealing with crises and situations. Then the other piece is kind of, it may be important to some, it may not. Again, depending on what stage of life you're at, is the flexibility for a work week and work schedule. So if you want a reduced work week, is that something that they offer? If you want to work remotely, is that something that they offer? So the ability to work remotely is in current times, that's the way of the workforce right now because of the pandemic. But it's something that it necessarily wasn't the case 6-8 months back. But if it's something important to you, think about that. And if a company doesn't provide that flexibility, again, is that how much influence is that going to pay as you think about evaluating and making that decision? And then, of course, as you think about location of the office, parking and transportation, do they offer benefits such as mass transit to help you get to work when you have to go into the office? A lot of companies offer that. So if that's important, looking at that full benefits package. So when you think about compensation and benefits from a total rewards perspective, that's going to be really important to focus on every single component, because even when you think about the benefits, there's still a investment the company is making by providing these non-monetary benefits to you. The other element in evaluating is going to be growth and progression opportunities. So what does that really mean? So what that means is the offer is for position A. And let's say an individual walks into position A, has been there for, let's say, 2-3 years, and really wants to take on more challenges and grow within the organization. Well, do they offer the ability to grow? And is that growth natural? Is it through taking classes, courses? How do they support their employees to get promoted and grow, both from a financial as well as a position perspective, as well as from a knowledge perspective? Do they offer classes and courses or educational tuition reimbursement or support to help employees with that growth, right? As we think about learning and taking on more skills and then enhancing those to get a higher level position, which will result in higher pay and then a higher responsibility. So do they really offer that? And are they a advocate and a champion for their employees to grow? And what does that look like, right? Depending on the role, is it you have multiple layers that you have to go through to where you might think your end goal is in terms of progression? Or is it, is it in the next couple years that they see the position growing? Because one of the things is you have to think about is from a career perspective. So, for example, if this is your first entrance into the workforce, you're going to start off, you're going to learn, and then within a couple of years, you're going to want to grow naturally because you've learned some of those concepts and you want to be challenged. So making sure it is a organization that does provide the internal opportunities for their employees to grow. So this way they're not they're not losing employees, and this way the employee isn't having to leave the firm in a couple of years, right? But they're really investing themselves in the organization. So I'll pause right there because it looks like we've got a couple of questions. So let me go ahead and answer those. So let's see. The first question is, how would you propose an increase in a salary offer based off of being bilingual? That's a great question. So from a bilingual perspective, if you have that skill, that's fantastic. You can absolutely go back to a recruiter and say, I do have this specialized skill of being bilingual. What I would like is there some sort of a add-on premium pay that I could get for having this skill? Now, one of the things that might come across is the position that you're that's being offered, that you're evaluating, is that a key requirement? So, for example, if being bilingual is not a requirement of the actual tasks that you're going to be doing, then the organization might come back and say, that's great and fantastic, we'll keep that in mind, but that's not a requirement of the position, right? Versus if the position requires somebody to be bilingual and use their skills, then you couldn't go back and say, because I have this skill, I would be interested to see if there's the flexibility, get a little bit of a higher premium for that skill that I have. And, you can really look at saying, maybe it's depending on the role, maybe you say, you add on a 5 or 10% premium or something like that. So you can absolutely go back and ask. Okay, great. The next question is, how would you evaluate unlimited paid time off policies? Are you seeing that more companies are shifting to these types of policies? Yes, I am seeing a lot more companies move towards unlimited paid time off. It's a way of kind of take it as you need it time off concept. So while in a traditional paid time off, what you may see is employees get 15, 20 days, kind of a bank of time off. And it's, in some cases it's use it or lose it. In some cases you can carry it over year. In some cases they pay it out if you were to leave the organization. We are seeing this transition where companies are moving towards unlimited time off. And in that case, it's changing the landscape where now no longer companies are having to pay these out, right? Or it's not a tracking of carry over year or this annual expense. And so it is based on kind of in the industry I'm in, I have seen a lot of the organizations shift towards that, and just kind of see in terms of, people manage it and take it as they need. they will, as an organization, right, monitor that. So you could have unlimited time off, but again, they're going to make sure, are the things that are required of your position for the business done, or is it just you've got somebody, taking, 15 days every other month off. So they do still monitor those things, but more paid time off policies, unlimited is where things are, what I've seen in the workspace move towards. Okay, let's see. Next question is, how do you determine or evaluate a job offer for a position that has not been filled or hired for so many years? Let me answer that first question. So one of the first things that would come to my mind if I was in that situation where a position, I would ask the organization, so what is going on, right? Why have they not filled it, and what has been the cause, right? Because what you want to get to is it because that they're looking for such a specific skill set that it's kind of like a unicorn? Maybe it doesn't exist. Or is it that they've had some internal changes where maybe they posted the position, and then due to the economy, they had to put a pause on it, and then they had to restart it, or maybe there's an organizational restructure that may have happened. But it's definitely something that you or anyone as a candidate or someone looking at that offer is not going to know just by looking at it. I think you would just have to go back to the organization, whether it's the hiring manager or the recruiter, and just ask them the question, why hasn't it been filled? What has been going on? Whether it's 60 days, 70 days that you have not found a candidate for this position. Okay. Let's see. The next question is, how do you evaluate employment or job offer from the public sector or government? Is it different from the private sector? And then I think tied to that is, how do you evaluate the quality of benefits being offered: health insurance, salary, vacation, time off, pension, retirement plan, tuition reimbursement? Okay. So as you think about the different sectors that exist, they're each going to carry a different type of a benefits package, and salary and vacation. And they're going to have different types of work. So first and foremost is, depending on the type of work that you're looking for, or the position, and assessing that against the two different sectors. So in the government sector, or a federal contractor, for example, right, there's organizations like national laboratories, etc. They all have positions that are, when you think about operationally, when you think about STEM, all those types of roles. And so organizationally, the makeup of that company is going to be very different versus someone in the private sector or the public sector that might have a stock, right? And one of the biggest things that I've seen is in terms of innovation, in terms of funding, a lot of the federal contractors, government, it's funded through the government, right? So for example, Argonne National Laboratory is an organization I used to work for, and I used to be the compensation analyst for them. And that organization was funded through the Department of Energy. And so as we thought about pay increases, it wasn't apples to apples, because it was funding that was different. There were a lot of different layers as you think about leadership decisions, and the product was different. It was research, it was science, versus working for something that for someone that might be public with some on the stock exchange. Their focus is different, right? Because their product then becomes their people, or it's an actual material thing, such as if they're producing a product, some sort of like a soap or a bolt or something like that. So the product output is different. And so, for example, in the professional services industry, what they do is, you've got employees that service clients as they think about audit, they think about tax. In my space that I'm in right now, or consulting, right? As you think about consulting on technology or implementation or business processes. And so for them, their product is not a tangible thing, right? going into into a client and saying, I'm going to do strategy work for you. I'm not going to give you a specific product that you can hand and that you can kind of touch and, you know, you can use. Instead, I'm going to give you the service of doing strategy for you. So that's how, as you think about public and private and government, that's how it varies in terms of what is your baseline services that they're doing and that they're offering. Okay, let's see. The next question is, how do you determine and evaluate the quality of benefits being offered? Every organization is going to have a different total rewards package. So no one organization is going to have identical. If one organization helps support employees with student loan payments, the other organization might say, I'm going to give a little bit more in the retirement 401k contribution. So as you think about health insurance and salary, again, salary is going to be dependent based on the size of the organization, right? So you think about an organization that is 30,000 employees versus an organization that might have 300 employees. You think about that landscape and scope, it's very different. So, and which means that their financials are very different. So salaries and benefits, a lot of that is driven through company financials, because again, it's a cost that a company has that they're having for their employees, right? So what ends up happening is, if you have multiple kind of evaluation of job offers, you could just line it up, right? Again, you think about, okay, salary, that's a big piece. Who's, you know, your thought might be, who's offering me the highest salary? Maybe that's my first check mark. Second, vacation. If one offers unlimited versus 15 days off, is unlimited vacation important to you? Right? And then again, you have to go through each of those elements and think about, you know, is this helping your personal growth? Again, as we kind of talked about a little bit ago, your professional and your personal and your private, and is it helping and aligning with that? Okay. The next question, what type of value would you give, or how to evaluate stock options when it is a startup company that hasn't gone public yet? Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I would say it's hard. It's a great component to think about. Again, I would evaluate it on the surface for what it's worth. A lot of stock options are driven to be kind of long-term, right? As you think about, if you're thinking more in a short term, like within a year, I would, you know, I'm going to grow X amount. I'm not sure the stock option will give you that, right? Within a year, because a lot of times stock is looked at from a mid to long-term perspective. So while it's great that they may give you a stock option and there might be a value attached to it, no, it's more a long-term, kind of like a 401k. It's not going to be immediate, kind of like your salary, right? When you think about your salary and your bonus, even, it's immediate. It's short-term. It's within a year, right? So it's your take-home pay. So salary and bonus is going to have a higher value. But, you know, from a long-term perspective, you know, a stock option would help. Okay, it looks like, oh, thank you, Justin, for answering that question. All right, great. So I think, you know, all of these are such great questions that you guys provided. So, you know, continue to bring them on. But I think as you think about the offer, it's what's right and what's important for you, right? I think it's not, and an offer may not have everything that you want in a lot of cases. And I think you have to be that decision maker to say, what are those critical elements that I want? And does that offer it? And is that okay with me, right? Is it okay, or is it a deal breaker? Because at the end of the day, you have to be happy as you evaluate with your decision and your outcome. And a lot of times what ends up happening is you don't know, because it's kind of, you're looking at it from a short term versus a long term. And depending on where you are within your career, right? Whether you're short term or whether you're kind of an entry level stepping into the workforce, or you're tenured, you know, kind of changing jobs and reevaluating maybe careers that you want to go into. So it's really thinking through some of those things. One of the other things that kind of from a principal perspective that I really liked that I read with the Harvard Business Review was they have kind of a handful of do's and don'ts as you think about it. So for example, do think what you want out of your job, and use that framework to determine the elements of the offer that you want to alter, right? Just think through it. Be selective about what you want to push back, right? If you have 5 things, are you going to push back on those 5 things? Or really, of those 5, 3 are most critical and important to you. So think about that and then use that to push back and check with the recruiter or the organization in that information, right? Employ your classic negotiation skills, such as, right, maximizing the cost of things that you're okay to accept and minimizing the things that you don't want. So it's okay to go back and talk to the organization's hiring manager or even the recruiter to say, hey, let's just pause. I'm excited about this job offer. Or, if you've already interviewed and you don't have the offer yet, but go back to them with these questions while they're still making that decision and say, let's just, pause. And can you just give me some more additional information as you're going through the decision-making process on some of these elements? Some of the don'ts that go with the do's is don't be critical and suspicious when questioning something about the offer, right? They're excited to provide the offer to the candidate, and just as hopefully they're hoping the candidate's excited too. So it kind of goes both ways, right? Don't neglect to consider your walkaway alternatives, right? Or red flags, right? Some of our instincts provide us the ability to say something doesn't seem right. Something just doesn't, and that's okay. That's a red flag. And again, talk to them, or just if that's a big red flag, then you might decide this is not the right fit for you. I think in current economy, as we think about this non-standard year that we're having, a lot of organizations are being really thoughtful as they think about extending offers. I think a lot of the candidates are being mindful as they think about their careers and just seeing how the economy's changed. So really just kind of, don't be rigid that you miss a wonderful opportunity to gain experience, right? A lot of times we change careers or we go into a career with having no background and hoping maybe I'll like what I'm doing. And that's okay. A lot of times that's how people come across what their careers are, is without having that preconceived notion. So really think about kind of, right, is gaining experience your primary goal, or is it something else, right? Because at the end of the day, you are going to be at that role and the company for 40 plus hours. So that's going to be really critically important. Also, talk to your family and friends. They've had experiences like this before. They can walk you through what have they done. They can be your sounding board as you kind of talk to them about the pros and the cons and I don't know what to do. What should I go back with? Use the internet. There's so many sources available online, way more than when I was starting off my career. So utilize those sources and get educated and learn, right? Learn more. And throughout that learning process, you might realize or something might click to say, oh, wait, I didn't think about this. And maybe this is important to me. So really kind of leverage all of that to really get to the decision you're looking for as you think about, what's that right job and evaluating that job. All right. So it looks like we've got a question. How do you determine training and growth opportunities on a job employment offer? So that's something that you can ask, right? A lot of times, so there's 2 ways. You can determine that by 2 ways. One is you can ask to say, do you have a learning and an organizational development department within the company that provides the ability for employees to take classes, to get certified? For example, they might have an internal project management certification or workshop, or they might have tuition reimbursement to help you with getting that certification. So you can absolutely ask. And then a lot of times organizations, when they extend out an offer, they'll send you a package, and that package is going to have your offer letter, your benefits, and in that benefits, they're also going to have other supporting material that might tell you in terms of from an employment training perspective, if what are their training pieces and stuff they have. But you should absolutely ask in terms of what sort of an internal training opportunities do they offer, depending on the field that you're in. Sometimes it's external training too, right? So you could also take it and extend it out to say, does the organization support external training, right? So if you, again, back to kind of if you want to get a project management certification, is that something that they would support? A lot of times organizations support training and growth opportunities as long as it has something to do with your job. So for example, if you're in finance and all of a sudden you say, well, I think I want to go get a degree in, I want to go get a degree in technology or some sort of technology certification. And both of those two are not interconnected in terms of the use of it. They might say, okay, well, let's think about this. Can you really use that skill within your current role? So they might assess like that to come to that determination, but you can absolutely ask in terms of what training and growth opportunities they have, because you're not going to know just off of a letter and in a package that they send you. That's going to be a live conversation that you're going to have with either the recruiter or the hiring manager, right? So depending, again, what stage of the interview process you're in, if you're being proactive and you're on the front end, have that as one of your questions when you're interviewing to say, hey, well, how do what are some training and growth opportunities for this position? So write it down, ask them when you're meeting with the hiring manager and interviewing. So hopefully that answers your question and helps you. Okay, great. Well, I think in terms of sharing the information, that's just a little bit of the elements that I wanted to share as we think about job evaluations and how to evaluate that job offer. I think Teresa and Kristen, I'll stick around. If you guys have more questions, let me know. Again, every situation's different. No one situation is going to be the same. It is stressful, especially when you're thinking about a job offer, and it's a risk, right? When you think about it, you're taking a risk. So for someone that might already have a job and they're thinking about switching to a different one, it's a risk that they're taking of starting new. It happened to me a year and a half ago where it was like, oh my gosh, I have to start again. I have to build my relationships at work again. And so it's a risk, but again, there's something that's driving you to take that risk, right? So really think through it. And a lot of companies know that. So as you think about evaluating this offer, ask for time. Don't think if somebody gives you an offer on Monday morning, you need to get back to them on Monday evening or Monday at 5 p.m. Ask for 2-3 days. Say, I just want to talk through it with my family, just want to assess it. I might circle back with some questions within 24 hours. And 2 to 3 days is pretty standard in terms of providing a response back. So feel free to ask, because that's what's going to help you to really think through what are those key things that you might be missing. All right, okay. So there's a question on what my master's degree is in. It's in human resources management. So it's HR management. The answer is. Great. Well, I appreciate everyone today. Thank you so much. Hopefully, I hope this helped, right? Because it's Thursday afternoon, and I thank you for joining on the call. So hopefully, this helps a lot. So.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Margi.
Yeah.
I actually had just one question too.
Sure.
And I think you kind of started touching on this actually when you mentioned about not feeling that pressure to have to give an answer right away and that sort of thing. But for me working in the career counselor role, I'm talking with a lot of students now who are getting ready to graduate in December. And obviously right now it's a tough time to be looking for a job and things like that, where they might feel like just if they get an offer, they have to accept that job right away. So would you have any other kind of like last tips or advice for people who are going to be graduating in December and kind of are feeling that pressure now, looking for a job and for their first professional job, maybe in the middle of a pandemic?
Yeah, it is. And it is, right. And especially the fact that you see, unemployment numbers. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be that statistic. I don't want to be the one that gets added to that number, right? So yeah, and I think that's a great question. I think it is, and I think we all are evaluating work very differently this year, right? Because of the pandemic. And as you think about, if you don't have multiple offers, you have one offer in your hand. It is a work that you're doing, that you want to do or that you want to get into. My personal view is it's okay to take it, right? Because as you think about your first step into the professional world, you have to start somewhere, right? And I look at it as it may not be your perfect job. It may not have all 15 things, but if it has 10 things, because at the end of the day, you are still going to learn from that job. You're going to learn your soft skills. You're going to learn some of your professional skills, right? As you think about communication, how do you deal with different layers of management, right? Some kind of system type skills, right? The systems that you work with. Those are all skills that you're building onto your portfolio. And what it's doing is it's giving you that firsthand experience into that professional world, right? It's going to start help you think about like, oh, I never thought about like organizational values and culture. Like that's really important. Like, teaming is really important. So it's going to help with all those things. And I think a lot of times what might happen is if you're starting or looking for roles and you might have one and you're like, well, I'd like more salary or I'd like more of this, right? In a typical year where it's a employees market, right? When you think about there's, lots of like talent wars happening depending again on the field that you're in, you might have that flexibility to entertain. But so I look at it as like, even if you might take that job, you're still adding on your portfolio and you're starting to build it, right? I think the other risk is if you're okay with the risk of, not taking that position and not having employment for another couple months, that's okay too, right? Again, it comes back to your personal preference. But for me, just because a job doesn't have, all 15 things, because I've been in the workforce for a very long time, and I will tell you, not every role has everything that you want. There's things that you love to do, and there's going to be things that you're like, I just prefer not to do these things, but you're going to have to do them. So it's just you have to be okay with it, right? Day in and day out. And I think that's how I kind of look at it. Is it's you're still building your portfolio, right? So it's, does it look, are you okay with having a gap of no work, or are you okay with saying, like, even though like it was an interim time frame where I wasn't necessarily doing all 15 things, maybe 10, you're still growing yourself, right? From a knowledge perspective and experience perspective. So does that help, Teresa?
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. All right, looks, we've got a couple good questions. Okay, so let's see, I just received an email. Let's see, rejection reasons for a position was candidate received within ownership period. So I have not seen that. I think that might be driven more based on the organization. And they might potentially, it sounds like it might be some sort of a time frame that that they might have been working with in terms of, but that's, interesting because I've not seen that. I've not seen that where it's a candidate received with an ownership period. So I'm sorry, I've not seen that reason in my. Typically, uh, it's usually things have changed on the organization side, or they found a more viable candidate, which I don't know if this somehow ties into maybe some sort of an internal way that they might assess why they've kind of had this sort of a rejection reason. All right, let's see the next question. If a job has a designated salary range, can you still negotiate? And if the salary range is large, like 40 to 60, how do you negotiate that? So if the job has a range, you can always ask, right? You can always say, okay, so what's going to happen? Let's take the scenario of 40 to 60,000. They might come to you and say, we're going to give you $45,000. That's our initial offer to you. You might say, okay, well, your range was up to 60, so why would you give me $45,000, right? Then what they'll come back and say is, well, it's because of A, B, and C, right? So as you think about a range of pay, keep this in mind. Typically, it's based on the level of your experience, right? So they might have a range of 40 to 60, but they might say, okay, if I've got somebody that's coming into that position with no experience, they might start at the lower end, right? Because they're going to have that period of starting with the company, understanding, doing the work. And so that's why they might give you on the lower end. And they might also say, okay, do I have people within the organization that are maybe a little bit more experienced on the higher end of the pay scale? So that's why they might not come to you with just saying, we're going to give you $60,000. But that's how the range is usually developed, is it looks at that experience scale of kind of, less experienced. And as you grow with your experience, you kind of climb that scale towards the higher end. So in this case, you go back and say, okay, well, you might be giving this to me because I might not have an experience on the lower end, but I'd still like to negotiate and go up a little bit. They might not go up to 60 because maybe internally that's their threshold for like someone coming in with multiple years of experience. And if you don't have that, then they might not give that to you, right? So it's okay to go back and go up a little bit if you know that range, but just keep in mind that typically that sliding range is because they use experience as a way to say, okay, I'm going to kind of use less experience versus higher experienced. And they also, for the most part, a lot of organizations also have to assess that against their existing population, right? So they've already got a group of employees that might already be doing the same type of role that they're hiring for. And so they have to take a view into that account from a peer equity perspective to make sure that they're also, ensuring that they're evaluating it based on experience. Hopefully that helps. Hey, I think it looks like we're good on questions.
All right. Well, thank you so much once again, Margi, for sharing your expertise today with our students and any alumni, faculty, or staff who might be on the meeting as well. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank
And keep in mind, students, we have one more workshop this semester coming up on December 3rd, Thursday at 3 o'clock. We're going to have our virtual career fair prep workshop, because we are having our virtual career fair on Tuesday, December 8th from 2 to 5 p.m. So if you've never really had to do a career fair before, especially a virtual one, and you just want to learn more about how to prepare for that and how it all works, please join us for the prep workshop December 3rd, 3 o'clock. That's going to be our last one for this semester to wrap things up. Hard to believe that we're almost into December here. So hope to see you guys all next semester at future workshops as well, and at our virtual fair. Thank you again, Margi, once again for everything today and all the great knowledge and expertise that you've shared with our students. So
yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I love coming back and talking to you guys. So it's hopefully, I just want to share my experience and help you all. So, thanks so much for your time and this afternoon. And this was great. So hope everyone has a safe and happy holidays in the next couple of weeks and a great rest of the semester.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Margie.
Thanks. Bye, Kristen.
Bye. Have a great night.
You too.
We appreciate you.
Absolutely appreciate you guys. Bye.